The alarm goes off and you open your eyes. But it's not an awakening, it's a fight. Your body is heavy, your mind is already tired before you even get out of bed, and that feeling of defeat has already taken over you before your first coffee. You look at the ceiling and think, another day like this. Meanwhile, you see other people around you who seem to jump out of bed ready to conquer the world, full of energy, motivated, strong. And you're there, dragging your body to the bathroom, carrying a weight that nobody sees, wondering what's wrong with you. Why is it so easy for them and so hard for you? You've already tried going to bed earlier. You've already tried those morning routines everyone talks about. You even bought a book about habits. But nothing changes. Every day is the same internal battle, the same feeling of always being one step behind, always chasing an energy that never seems to come. And the worst part is that you start to think the problem is you, that you're weak, that you don't have what others have. But let me tell you a truth that will completely change the way you understand this. It's not about willpower. It's not about you being weaker than others. What you're living through has a precise scientific explanation, and more importantly, it has a systematic solution. What separates those who wake up strong from those who wake up broken is not genetics. It's not luck. It's not privilege. It's the way your mind is programmed to process what happened yesterday and prepare for what's coming tomorrow. Henry Ford said something that most people don't understand. Your mind is a factory that runs 24 hours a day, including while you sleep. And if you haven't programmed this factory to produce energy and clarity, it will produce exactly the opposite: exhaustion and confusion. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what's happening behind the scenes of your mind, why some wake up strong while others wake up defeated, and more importantly, I'm going to give you the exact protocol to reprogram your mental factory and start waking up like those people you envy. This isn't cheap motivation. It's mental engineering based on applied stoicism and neuroscience. Stay with me until the end, because when you understand the system, you'll never wake up broken again. Here's what nobody tells you about waking up. The moment you open your eyes is not the beginning of your day. It's the output of a production line that started running the second you closed your eyes the night before. Your brain spent the last 6 to 8 hours processing, organizing, and manufacturing your morning state. And if that factory was fed garbage inputs, it's going to produce garbage outputs. This is not philosophy. This is how your biological machine actually works. While you sleep, your brain is running a quality control process on everything that happened during your waking hours. Every thought you had, every emotion you felt, every decision you made or avoided. It's sorting through all of this data and building what neuroscientists call your affective forecast, which is basically your brain's prediction of how you're going to feel when you wake up. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Your brain doesn't care about truth. It cares about patterns. If you spent yesterday in a state of anxiety, procrastination, and defeat, your brain logs that as the pattern. It stamps that pattern as the default setting, and when you wake up, it boots up that exact same operating system. You feel tired because your brain predicted you would feel tired based on yesterday's data. You feel unmotivated because your brain is running the same motivation deficit program it ran 24 hours ago. This is why people who wake up strong seem to have some secret advantage. They don't. They just programmed their mental factory with different inputs. They fed their brain different data before they went to sleep, and their brain produced a different output when they woke up. Let me show you exactly how this works. There's a neural circuit in your brain called the default mode network. This is the autopilot system that runs when you're not actively focused on a task. It's the voice in your head, the background noise, the mental chatter. And here's the critical part. This system is most active during 2 periods of your day, right before you fall asleep and right after you wake up. Whatever thoughts are running through this circuit before sleep become the template for what runs through it after waking. If you went to bed replaying your failures, your brain is going to wake you up in failure mode. If you went to bed worried about tomorrow, your brain is going to wake you up in worry mode. Your morning state is not random. It's manufactured by the inputs you gave your system the night before. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago without brain scans or neuroscience. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations about the practice of evening reflection. not as some spiritual ritual, but as quality control for the mind. He knew that the last thoughts of the day determined the first thoughts of the next day. He was programming his mental factory, and Henry Ford took this same principle and applied it to industrial production. He said, "Before everything else, getting ready is the secret of success. Your evening routine is not about relaxation. It's about getting your mind ready to produce strength instead of weakness when morning comes." But here's what most people get wrong. They think the solution is just to think positive thoughts before bed. That's not how this works. Your brain is not stupid. You can't just paste happy affirmations over a foundation of unprocessed stress and expect your mental factory to run smoothly. That's like putting premium fuel in an engine full of dirty oil and expecting peak performance. It doesn't work that way. What you need is a systematic process to clear the production line before you shut down for the night. And this is where the Stoic practice of evening review becomes a precision tool, not a feel-good exercise. Here's the protocol. Every night before sleep, you're going to run a 3-part audit on your mental factory. First, you identify what went into production today. What did you actually do? Not what you wish you did, not what you should have done, what actually happened. Second, you assess the quality. What worked? What didn't? Where did the production line break down? Third, you set tomorrow's production orders. What is the one thing that must happen tomorrow for the day to be considered successful? This is not journaling for therapy. This is quality control for your mental output. You're debugging the system before it runs the overnight processing cycle. Now let's talk about why you wake up physically tired even after 8 hours of sleep. Your body is not the problem. Your nervous system is running a deficit budget. Here's how it works. Your autonomic nervous system has 2 modes: sympathetic, which is your stress response system, and parasympathetic, which is your recovery system. These 2 systems are supposed to balance each other out across a 24-hour cycle. You spend the day in sympathetic mode, handling stress, making decisions, being alert. Then you're supposed to switch into parasympathetic mode in the evening, where your body recovers, repairs, and recharges. But most people never make that switch. They stay in sympathetic mode all day and all night. They go to bed with their stress response systems still running at full capacity. And when that happens, sleep becomes just unconsciousness, not recovery. You're offline, but you're not recharging. This is why you can sleep for 8 hours and still wake up exhausted. Your battery never actually charged because the charging system never turned on. And the reason it never turned on is because you never signaled to your nervous system that the workday is over. You just collapsed into bed with your mind still running the same stress loops it was running all day. Your brain interprets this as the threat is still active, stay in alert mode. And it does, all night, processing stress, generating cortisol, keeping your body in a state of low-level emergency. By morning, you've burned through your energy reserves without actually accomplishing anything. You wake up depleted because you never stopped producing stress hormones. The Stoics called this not putting down the burden. Epictetus talked about people who carry their problems to bed like a heavy pack and wonder why they can't rest. He understood that mental recovery requires a deliberate shutdown sequence. You have to actively signal to your system that the day is complete, the work is done, and it's safe to enter recovery mode. Without this signal, your nervous system assumes the battle is still ongoing and keeps you in combat mode indefinitely. This is not a metaphor. This is literally what your biology does. Your body takes its cues from your mind. If your mind doesn't close the loop on the day, your body doesn't activate the recovery process. Here's the shutdown protocol. 30 minutes before you want to fall asleep, you perform what I call the production line halt. You physically write down on paper everything that's still running in your mental background. Every unfinished task, every worry, every decision that needs to be made. You're not solving these things. You're just acknowledging them and assigning them to tomorrow's production schedule. This act of writing them down tells your nervous system, these items are logged, they're on the schedule, you don't need to keep running them in background mode overnight. Your brain can release them from active memory and shift into recovery mode. This is not magical thinking. Studies on sleep quality show that people who do a worry dump before bed fall asleep faster and sleep deeper because their brain is not burning energy trying to remember everything they're anxious about. Now let's talk about the people who wake up strong. What are they doing differently? They're not more disciplined. They're not mentally tougher. They've just installed better production protocols. Think about a factory that produces high-quality products consistently. It's not because the workers are superhuman. It's because the systems are optimized. The same raw materials go in, but the process is designed to produce excellence, not defects. Your mind works exactly the same way. The same 24 hours, the same biology, but if your systems are optimized, you produce energy and clarity instead of exhaustion and confusion. The question is not why do some people wake up strong? The question is, what systems do they have running that you don't? Here's what I've observed after studying high performers across different fields. They all have one thing in common. They treat their mind like Henry Ford treated his assembly line. They've eliminated waste, they've standardized the process, and they've built in quality control checkpoints. They don't wing it. They don't hope for the best. They run a systematic protocol that produces consistent results, and the core of that protocol is this: they control their inputs. They understand that output quality is determined by input quality, so they guard their mental inputs like a factory guards its raw materials. They're extremely selective about what goes into their mind in the final hours before sleep, because they know that's what their brain will process all night and deliver back to them in the morning. Let me give you a specific example. One of the most successful entrepreneurs I studied has a rule: no new information after 8 p.m. No news, no social media, no complex problems, no heavy conversations. After 8 p.m., his mental factory is in shutdown mode. He's only processing what already went in during the day. He's not adding new items to the production line. Why? Because he learned that every new input after 8 p.m. becomes overnight processing load. His brain will chew on it all night instead of moving into deep recovery. By cutting off new inputs, he allows his system to complete its processing and transition into restoration mode. The result: he wakes up with mental clarity and energy because his brain actually recovered instead of working overtime on problems he dumped into it right before bed. This is the opposite of what most people do. Most people scroll their phones right up until they close their eyes. They're flooding their mental factory with random inputs right before shutdown. News headlines, social media drama, other people's problems, comparison triggers, you name it. And then they wonder why they wake up feeling anxious and overwhelmed. It's because their brains spent all night trying to process the garbage data they dumped in at the last minute. This is like a factory manager dumping a truck full of defective materials onto the production line at closing time and expecting quality products in the morning. It doesn't work. You can't input chaos and expect to output order. Now here's the Stoic perspective on this. The Stoics had a practice called gatekeeping the mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind is the citadel, and no external thing can capture it without your consent." What does that mean? It means your mind is a fortress, and you're the gatekeeper. You decide what gets in, every piece of information, every thought, every emotion. You have the power to accept it or reject it at the gate. But most people don't use this power. They leave the gates wide open and let everything flood in. Then they're surprised when their inner citadel is overrun with chaos. The Stoics understood that mental strength begins with input control. You can't build a strong mind if you're allowing weak, chaotic, destructive inputs to flow in unchecked. Let me pause here for a second and ask you something that maybe nobody's ever asked you before. What's the worst part about waking up feeling broken? Not what you tell other people, but the part you carry in silence. The part that hits you in those first moments when you open your eyes and realize you have to face another day like this. I want you to know something. What you're feeling is way more common than you think. Thousands of people watch this video every day carrying the exact same weight you're carrying. If you have the courage, leave a comment telling me what that worst part is for you. It can be something simple, like, the worst part is feeling like I already lost before the day started, or the worst part is seeing other people full of energy while I'm dragging myself through the morning. Your honesty will make someone else feel less alone today, and sometimes that's exactly what someone needs to hear to take the first step. Now let me continue showing you how to break this pattern. The real breakthrough comes when you understand this. Your morning state is not happening to you. You're manufacturing it. Every single night, you're running a production process that creates tomorrow's version of yourself, right now. That process is producing a broken version. But that's only because the systems are set up to produce that outcome. Change the systems, and you change the output. This is the Ford principle applied to human psychology. He didn't make better cars by hoping his workers would magically perform better. He redesigned the production system to eliminate defects. You need to do the same thing with your mental production system. Here's the complete evening protocol that will reprogram your mental factory to produce morning strength instead of morning weakness. Step 1. The production line audit. At the end of your workday, not right before bed, you take 10 minutes to review what actually happened today. Write down 3 things. What got produced, meaning what did you actually accomplish? What were the defects, meaning where did things break down or not go as planned? And what's the single most important item for tomorrow's production schedule? This gives your brain clear data to process overnight instead of just running loops of anxiety and regret. You're giving it specific information to work with. Step 2. The nervous system shift. Between your work time and your sleep time, you need a deliberate transition period. This is not optional. This is where you signal to your biology that the workday is over and recovery mode can begin. The most effective protocol I've found is this: change your physical location. Even if it's just moving from your desk to a different room. Change your physical state. Do something that's completely different from your work activity. If you've been sitting, move. If you've been talking, be silent. If you've been staring at screens, look at something real. This physical shift triggers a neurological shift. Your brain recognizes the pattern change and begins the transition from sympathetic to parasympathetic mode. Step 3. The input cutoff. 2 hours before sleep, you implement a total ban on new complex information. No news, no work problems, no heavy conversations, no rabbit holes on the internet. You're in processing mode, not input mode. Your brain needs time to organize and file what already came in today. If you keep adding new inputs right up until sleep, your brain never gets to complete its filing process. It's stuck in intake mode all night, which prevents deep recovery. Think of it like a restaurant kitchen. There's a point in the night when they stop taking new orders so the kitchen can finish the existing orders and clean up properly. Your mind needs the same boundary. Step 4. The Stoic evening review. This is different from the production audit you did earlier. This is about your internal state, not your external results. Right before bed, you ask yourself 3 Stoic questions. What did I do well today that aligned with my principles? Where did I act out of alignment with who I want to be? What's one adjustment I'll make tomorrow? This review process does something critical for your overnight processing. It gives your brain a clear framework for making sense of the day. Instead of your brain randomly processing everything that happened and generating anxiety about things you can't control, you're directing it to focus on what matters: your character, your choices, your growth. This is quality control for your identity, not just your productivity. Step 5. Tomorrow's single target. The last thing you do before sleep is write down 1 sentence. Tomorrow is successful if I accomplish this one thing. Just one thing. Not a list of 10 items. 1 critical target. This does 2 things for your overnight processing. First, it gives your subconscious mind a clear problem to work on while you sleep. Your brain will literally run simulations and generate solutions overnight if you give it a clear target. Second, it eliminates the morning overwhelm. You wake up knowing exactly what the priority is. You don't waste energy in decision paralysis trying to figure out what to do first. The decision is already made. You just execute. Now let's talk about what happens in the morning when you've run this protocol correctly. You wake up and something is different. The heaviness is not there. The dread is not there. You don't feel like you're already behind before you start. Why? Because your nervous system actually recovered overnight. Your brain actually completed its processing instead of running stress loops. And you have clarity about what today is for because you defined it the night before. This is not magic. This is systematic mental engineering. You've eliminated the defects in your production process, and now your factory is producing the output you actually want. But here's what's going to happen. The first few times you try this, your brain is going to resist. It's been running the old pattern for so long that it thinks that's just how things are. When you try to implement the input cutoff, You're going to feel this pull to check your phone, to scroll, to fill the silence with noise. That's not boredom. That's withdrawal from the chaos addiction. Your nervous system has been running on stress and stimulation for so long that calm feels uncomfortable. Push through it. The discomfort is not a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that you're rewiring a deeply embedded pattern. This is where most people quit. They try the new protocol for 2 days, feel uncomfortable, and go right back to the old pattern because at least it's familiar. Don't be most people. Henry Ford said something profound. Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. Every morning you wake up broken is not a personal failure. It's data. It's feedback from your mental production system showing you that the current process is producing defects. The intelligent response is not to beat yourself up or to conclude that you're just not built like those other people. The intelligent response is to redesign the process. That's what engineers do. They don't blame the machine for producing bad output. They fix the system that's creating the output. You're both the engineer and the machine. You have the power to redesign your own production process. Let me tell you what the Stoics would say about this. They would say you're suffering because you've outsourced your internal state to external circumstances. You've given the world permission to determine how you feel when you wake up. If yesterday was chaotic, you wake up chaotic. If yesterday was stressful, you wake up stressed. You've made your morning state dependent on variables you can't control. That's not weakness. That's just a system error. The Stoic solution is this: take back control of your internal state by controlling your internal processes. You can't control what happens in the world, but you can control what your mind does with that information. You can control what you allow in before sleep. You can control what framework your brain uses to process the day. You can control what target you set for tomorrow. These are all variables you own completely. This is the dichotomy of control applied to your morning state. You don't control whether you have energy when you wake up. That's the output of multiple biological systems working overnight, but you do control the inputs that determine what those systems produce. You control your evening routine. You control when you stop taking in new information. You control what you think about before sleep. You control whether you do the Stoic review or just collapse into bed with your mind still spinning. These controllable inputs are what determine your uncontrollable outputs. Focus on the inputs, and the outputs take care of themselves. This is not theory. This is how systems work. Now, I want to show you something that most people miss. The reason you feel weak in the morning is not just because you're tired. It's because you wake up with no sense of agency. You wake up feeling like life is happening to you, like you're just reacting to whatever comes at you. And that feeling of powerlessness is what drains you more than anything else. Research in psychology shows that perceived control is one of the strongest predictors of mental resilience. When you feel like you have control over your life, you have energy. When you feel like you're just being pushed around by circumstances, you feel defeated before you even start. The morning protocol I just gave you is not just about sleep quality. It's about rebuilding your sense of agency. Every step of that protocol is you actively choosing how to direct your mind. You're not hoping for a good night's sleep. You're engineering it. You're not wishing you'll wake up strong. You're building the system that produces strength. Here's what happens over time if you actually implement this. After about 2 weeks of consistent practice, something shifts. You start waking up with what I call quiet confidence. It's not this pumped-up motivational feeling. It's just this calm sense of, I know what I'm doing today, and I'm capable of doing it. That shift happens because your brain has finally updated its prediction model. It's been collecting data for 2 weeks that says, oh, we're running a different program now. This person is actually taking control of their inputs and processes. We should adjust our outputs accordingly. Your effective forecast changes. Your brain starts predicting competence instead of chaos, and that becomes your new default setting. But here's the critical part. You have to protect this new default setting, because your old pattern is still there in your neural circuitry. It's not deleted. It's just not active right now. And the moment you stop running the new protocol, the moment you fall back into your old evening habits, your brain will revert to the old pattern because that groove is still deeper. This is why systems matter more than motivation. Motivation gets you started. Systems keep you running. You need to make this evening protocol as automatic as brushing your teeth. It's not something you do when you feel like it. It's just what you do. Every single night. Non-negotiable. The Stoics understood this. They didn't practice Stoicism only when they felt inspired. They had daily practices that they did regardless of how they felt, because they knew that their mental strength depended on consistent inputs, not sporadic bursts of effort. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the world, and he still did his evening review every single night. Not because he was some superhuman philosopher, because he understood that, without that systematic practice, his mind would default to chaos just like anyone else's. He was running quality control on his mental factory every day because he knew that's what it takes to produce wisdom instead of weakness. Let me give you the brutal truth that nobody wants to hear. If you keep waking up broken, it's because you keep choosing to run the same broken process. I know that sounds harsh, but it's also empowering. Because if it's your choice, that means you have the power to choose differently. You're not a victim of your biology. You're not cursed with bad genetics. You're just running a defective production process, and you have the ability to redesign it right now. Tonight, you don't need permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need to make the decision that you're done producing weakness and you're ready to engineer strength. Henry Ford transformed the entire manufacturing industry not because he had better workers or better materials. He transformed it because he redesigned the process. He looked at how things were being done, identified the waste and inefficiency, and built a new system that produced better results with the same inputs. You can do the exact same thing with your mind. Same 24 hours as everyone else. Same human biology, different system, different output. The people who wake up strong are not special. They just stopped accepting defective outputs and started engineering quality inputs. Here's your implementation challenge. Tonight, you're going to run the complete evening protocol I just outlined. Not tomorrow night, tonight. Production line audit, nervous system shift, input cutoff, Stoic review, single target for tomorrow. All 5 steps. And tomorrow morning, you're going to notice a difference. It might be subtle. You might not wake up feeling like a superhero. But you'll notice that the heaviness is lighter, the dread is quieter, and you have clarity about what you're doing today. That's your system upgrade taking effect. That's your mental factory producing a higher quality output because you gave it higher quality inputs. And once you feel that difference once, you'll understand that you've been in control this whole time. You just weren't using the right tools. The Stoics have a concept called premeditatio malorum, which means negative visualization. They would imagine the worst possible scenarios not to depress themselves, but to prepare their minds and remove the element of surprise. I want you to do the opposite right now. I want you to visualize what your life looks like 6 months from now if you master this system. You wake up every morning with energy and clarity. You move through your day with purpose instead of anxiety. You go to bed knowing you ran your mental quality control, and your system is set up to produce strength tomorrow. You're not hoping things will get better. You're engineering outcomes through systematic inputs. That version of you is not fantasy. That's just you with better mental production protocols. The only question is, are you going to install them or keep running the defective system? If you made it this far in the video, I already know something important about you. You're not looking for quick fixes or empty motivation. You're looking for real systems that produce real results, and that tells me you're exactly the kind of person who belongs in this community. This channel is not about feel-good messages or overnight transformations. It's about people who understand that mastery is a process, not an event. Every week, I bring you a new perspective on how your mind actually works, and more importantly, how you can engineer it to work for you instead of against you. If that resonates with you, subscribe to the channel. Not because I'm asking, but because you deserve a place where you can learn to build mental systems that actually function in the real world. The next video is already ready, and I'm confident it will give you another piece of the puzzle.